This essay seeks to explore the way in which the conception of the video jockey transformed the club scene in the late 20th and early 21st century through a fusion of music and image. Popularized in the 1970s by New York's Peppermint Lounge and the mid-1980s by MTV, early video jockeys were seen as on-air performers as opposed to visual artists. The video jockey to this day is more known for synthesizing and manipulating found media and moving image, often synchronizing their visuals with live music performances to create a captivating sensory experience for the audience. The exact definition of the video jockey is therefore a difficult one to delineate, owing to the fluidity of this role and the self-definitions of individual artists depending on the setting in which they perform. The term video jockey, colloquially known as VJs, is often disputed, as it was quickly seen as redundant or dated categorization of visual artists, and that those who are often described as VJs saw their practice more as visual performance art when not situated within the club circuit. However, the term VJ is still used to this day to describe the practice of combining image and sound to enhance the viewing experience of music performances, whether that be within the club scene or in wider music performances, and as a subset of visual production this essay seeks to further explore. The work produced by video jockeys within the club scene is often not seen as a form of high art, yet it often draws inspiration from fine art and pop culture. Considered a transient art form, it's not typically viewed or preserved in traditional art gallery contexts, despite its intrinsic relationship with fine art and art making. The dynamic nature of the production of live visuals makes the exercise of documenting discussions of live art a difficult task. Annette Decker states in her text, Sensational Technologies, that the turn to sensorial-focused art forms, in this case the connection of sound and vision, is said to have been a direct response to the increasing digitalization of society in the 90s. Increasing technological advancements inevitably began to influence the production of fine art and in turn destabilize the boundaries of high and low art forms. The visual production of the VJs therefore sits somewhere between these shifting boundaries, and this essay will explore how the VJ's work, not fitting into these categorization in fine art, contributes to its lack of preservation within art's histories. As this is a relatively new art form and often not placed within the realm of high art, academic literature is limited about the history of the VJ. Being such a contemporary creative medium, nowadays the performance of the VJ relies heavily on technological innovation, which has starkly impacted these visual artists' synesthetic performances through the decades. This lack of attention to the important role of the video jockey played in modern image production is what compelled me to undertake this research in depth, and due to the limited academic literature, this essay consists of a variety of research. I'll be looking at the writing of Annette Decker, Vivian van Saars, and Steve Gibson, various articles and websites, and my own first-hand research and analysis of performances I've been witness to. In this essay, I plan to explore the history of the interconnection between sound and moving image, and how technological advancements informed the work produced. I will then look at the work of VJ Weirdcore to see how this plays out in reality, and analyse performances from Aphex Twin and Tame Impala to exemplify the importance of visual performances. I also seek to explore the significance of synesthesia conjured through performance art and the ways in which it has been reflected before the VJ gained its name. I'm drawn to this subject as it intertwines greatly with my personal life and practice, specifically from attending music videos and DJ sets. I define myself a mixed media artist with an interest in experimental analog animation, which has become a large part of my practice. This first section seeks to explore the history of DJing and the first iterations of this form of visual communication, looking to early formations of this from the 1960s and the decades onwards. I will also analyse how modern technological innovations such as the computer influence the production of work. Despite often rejecting to label themselves VJs, as previously mentioned, their roles have become fundamental to rave culture and emerging artists. Described by Daniela Tordino as creating a symbiosis of image and sound, becoming an integral part of a live performance, they combine found image with movement to create a captivating atmosphere for the crowd, whilst enhancing the narrative of the music. J.M. Orters claims that experiencing the sensation of sound and image without the other could be seen as ineffectual, implying that the role of the VJ is crucial for an effective performance. Technological developments of software have played a crucial role in the accessibility of the synesthetic experience that the VJ creates. described as a dance between technological progress and human curiosity. As the role grew in popularity, equipment and availability of technology became cheaper, leading to a boom in performances. The introduction of video mixers in the 1970s enabled the artist to manipulate several video signals live, thus conjuring vibrant visual abstractions. This development in software sparked further investigations, which led to video synthesizers in the 1980s. These, however, generated video signals from scratch, which allowed them to move away from found image and create abstract moving image in geometrical pattern. This technological innovation had a major impact on the club scene at the time, often being accompanied by lasers and video displays. A significant turning point of VJing history was the introduction of computers in the 1990s, allowing VJs to use commercial live video applications such as VJam and FlameMotion to edit and synchronize videos, and it became significantly more accessible for artists worldwide. This access to collaboration globally has allowed VJ collectives to build upon new artistic exchange and cross-cultural narrative. One of the earliest techniques of integrating moving image and sound was the invention of the stereopticon slide, otherwise known as the magic lantern, by Christian Huygens in 1969. Lanterns were invented in the 17th century, however it wasn't until a century later that the magic lantern evolved, in which candlelight was used to project visuals painted on a glass slide. Heightened by a concave mirror and two convex lenses, the light reflected the projected image and was accompanied by music, thus conjuring a synesthetic experience for the audience. It became popular to use during performances, becoming an important part of the narrative and captivating the audience. Highlighting the significance of the lantern, Sally B. Balmer believes that the lantern became a metaphor for transparency and that it assists the disassociating seeing from being, suggesting the gap between visibility and non-visibility. This elucidates the significance of the transformative nature of the magic lantern, in which they see the stereopticon slide as a metaphor for the breaking down of borders between reality and fiction, much like the modern VJ set, which enhances the experience of sound, transforming it into an almost tangible feeling. Stepping away from the iconographic visual representation and storytelling of the magic lantern, an integral component that planted seeds in the contemporary VJ scene were liquid light shows, which explored conceptual depictions of music. Described as rich abstract imagery projected in real time on stage, this analog art form arose in the 1960s, using overhead projectors to reflect patterns in liquids to create psychedelic light art. These experimental visuals accompanied rock and roll shows and had a stark influence on the development of future music tours. A notable group founded by Joshua White in 1967 is the Joshua Light Show. He resided at Bill Graham's Gilmore East for almost its entire existence. The residents have received renowned attention in the art world and have collaborated with major music artists such as Jimi Hendrix, The Doors, and The Who. White professed in an interview, "For me, perfection equals a kind of death," reflecting the raw authenticity of the performances at the time. Only having access to analog techniques allowed the group to create this organic and fluid moving image. The creative ingenuity of these pre-digital visual artists not only influenced the psychedelic music scene in the 70s, but are considered to have a major impact on the development of contemporary VJs today. Their work can also be seen in the permanent collection at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. This again sparks my question of preservation. As these visual works from the 20th century are viewed in a museum context, how does this oppose the contemporary practice of the VJ now? VJing isn't typically recognized as a 21st century art form, despite being viewed in a similar context, for example in concerts and live music venues. The performance of a VJ nowadays isn't aligned with traditional art making, as they often use found image, whereas the light shows were using the physical liquid material and analog technique. Gregory Zimmerman questions how we can grasp this underdocumented, ephemeral visual art form that can only be analysed via photographic fragments and impressionistic written accounts, highlighting the transient nature of the practice. When work deals with sensorial experiences, it becomes even more deficient. This signifies the lack of preservation in the VJing industry, as it isn't necessarily deemed as a form of high art, and is typically a nighttime activity. Often viewed outside of a museum context, there aren't a vast amount of areas to view the practice of a VJ apart from online sites and live. By looking at these early conceptions of combining sound and moving image, we can see how the early VJ was conceived, perhaps one day the work of VJs will be seen with the same veneration as we now see early liquid light shows. This section explores phenomena of weirdcore as a subsect of contemporary VJing and the electronic music scene. Weirdcore is an aesthetic of using low-quality images, evoking feelings of nostalgia. Using imagery from the late 90s to the early 2000s, the aesthetic plays with the deliberate use of explicitly useless images, meaning they lack any conceptual explanation. A VJ who has adopted to this name as his own and is of particular interest to me is Weirdcore, an anonymous visual artist who is constantly pushing the boundaries of consciousness and visual interpretation through somewhat unsettling animations. Described in an interview with Dazed, that his visual art can tap into the weirdness of an artist's imagination, reflecting his surreal artistic style. Based in London, he is often seen manipulating moving image in real time, creating mind-bending and psychedelic digital visuals, which accompany a variety of experimental music artists such as MIA, Tame Impala, and Aphex Twin. Influenced by 60s psychedelia, paintings, and architecture, Weirdcore tends to step away from taking inspiration from other VJs and visual artists, highlighting his unique and abstract approach to his live shows. Despite being renowned within the electronic music industry, he tends to separate himself from the art world, claiming that he wouldn't define himself as a visual artist but an arty designer. He studied media communication at Leeds University and worked for a 3D computer company in 1997, which eventually led him to move to London and work in designing websites and DVD menus with his post-production design work. Now working within this industry, he began meeting more musicians, stating in an interview that a lot of his visuals used to be a visual representation of noise, and that making these visuals has similarities to how they make sounds. This production of synesthesia is vital to create a captivating sensorial experience for the crowd, forming a relationship between the VJ and the performer. A considerable turning point in his career was collaborating with experimental electronic musician Aphex Twin, Rich David James, in 2009. Keeping his identity hidden goes hand in hand with James' elusive performances and desire to remain out of the limelight. Weirdcore immediately becomes a defining attribute to James' performances after their first collaboration and has toured with him in his career ever since. He initially began experimenting with James' artwork, altering and distorting the surreal masks through sound reactive software and building visuals on top. Some consider him to have redefined the category of the VJ, specifically after he began feeding the crowd into his visuals, working with the notion of reality and blurring boundaries, relaying back to what Lee Palmer stated about the magic lantern. He mentioned in an interview with Dazed that he linked this motif with conspiracy theories. It reflects on how we're basically all constantly being surveyed, highlighting the constant observation of a performance. Tapping into this theme and being requested by James himself, Weirdcore began to film members of the crowd with a DV cam and infrared light. He, however, didn't feel as though he captured it until he began using computer vision the following year. Again, the innovation in technology played a huge role in the development of the visuals he made for Aphex Twin, allowing him to break the fourth wall and push the boundaries of what is considered of a VJ. In 2010, at LED Festival in Victoria Park, 3D face mapping was used for the first time in his live performances. Inspired by Aphex Twin's music video, Window Licker, Weirdcore began to warp face in the crowd and manipulate them in real time, pacing the renowned mask across the audience and distracting them from the artist on stage's dislike of attention. This also could have sparked the influence of the recent performance of Massive Attack in Bristol 2024, using political themes from Adam Curtis's films. They implemented facial recognition technology and plastered faces from the crowd on the screen, conjuring assumptions about their personalities, again questioning the constant feeling of surveying and highlighting the stark impression Weirdcore has had on contemporary VJing to this day. After seeing the effects of immersing the crowd in the projections, Weirdcore began to adapt the visuals to location. Using inspiration from political figures or celebrities, he would manipulate them in real time, again plastering James's face across the screen. Noting in a talk with Nicer Tuesdays, Weirdcore distinctly recalls receiving a larger cheer from the crowd than Aphex Twin himself during a performance. It felt surprising, as the crowd isn't technically there to see his work, yet were more excited about what they saw on screen rather than the music playing in that moment. This was first seen during a performance in 2011 in Finland, where he used photos of famous Olympian Matti Nikkonen and former President Urho Kekkonen, while simultaneously warping their faces. The simplicity of these visuals juxtapose the complex electronic music playing in the moment, having no extravagant lighting or effects, highlights the effectiveness of appealing to the crowd. Weirdcore described this moment as somewhat patriotic, yet it must have been very unexpected to the Finns in the crowd to have such specific faces appear on the screen. Playing with humour in this way was very unpretentious, complementing Aphex Twin's desire to remain out of the spotlight. The work of Weirdcore as an artist shows how the performance can be enhanced through visuals, and looking beyond the screen, he has revolutionized the role of the VJ. In this final section, I seek to explore the importance of synesthesia when responding to sound through visual art. Often referred to as coloured hearing, synesthesia is generally considered a broad term, but simply concludes that sounds have visual attributes, and is the act of combining the senses together to conjure a dynamic atmosphere. The relationship between the modern VJ and generation of synesthesia is vital within the club scene, sparking a connection between the crowd, music, and visual art. Whilst contemporary platforms continue to explore the act of synesthesia, it also dates back to the early 18th century, when Isaac Newton explored the relationship between the 7 notes of the musical scale and the 7 colours of the rainbow. Newton claimed that simultaneously increasing the frequency of light in the colour spectrum and the diatonic major scale go hand in hand with one another. This then led to the invention of the ocular harpsichord by Louis Bertrand Castel in 1743, which converted sound and light into colour, stating that he created the organ as a means to paint with light. Again, exploring the parallels between music notes and the coloured scale, each note represented a different colour. In the early 20th century, Kandinsky echoed similarities to this through his surreal, energetic paintings, reflecting a synesthesia that he saw colours when he heard music. He embedded sound dimension Klangen into his canvases. Kandinsky's connection to the senses explored the relationship between seeing and hearing, his fluid brushstrokes creating a feeling of motion across the composition, sparking an understanding of the sounds he was depicting. A contemporary exploration of the act of synesthesia through performance art is Barcode, a Dutch VJ collective from the early 21st century. Attempting to trigger the subconscious in their VJ performances, the group would evoke a surreal synesthetic experience for the audience. With the introduction of odours in their shows, they would experiment with levels of pleasure, describing their practice as confusing constructivism. By experimenting with the senses, Barcode would navigate their storytelling using the audience's reactions, allowing them to form their own narrative. Whilst practices when using a physical medium can easily be preserved, performance art, specifically sensorial, is practically ephemeral. Investigations when tapping into the senses are typically viewed as momentary and can only be fully immersive when experienced firsthand or in the club scene, in this instance, and would be difficult to preserve or recreate in a gallery setting. Another contemporary subsect of this motif is Tame Impala, known for his synesthetic and immersive visual performances. Behind the ingenuity of the psychedelic electronic group is Kevin Parker, who also often uses a synthesizer through his practice. Despite his skilled abilities to play music, the seemingly most striking part of his concerts tend to be the experimental and dynamic moving image on the surrounding screens. I saw Tame Impala perform in 2022 at Primavera Sound in Barcelona, in which a woman appeared on the screen warning the audience about psychedelic drugs, while simultaneously distorting her face and creating this truly mind-bending immersive experience. Being confronted with such a captivating visual performance before Tame Impala had even come on stage, allowing us in the audience to navigate our own narrative throughout the show. However, a performance with a stark exploration of synesthesia was his headline act at the 2017 Panorama Music Festival in New York. This concert's visuals, in comparison to their 2022 narrative, follow a more ambient, psychedelic route, focusing predominantly on geometrical pattern and vibrant color palettes. The visual imagery was created by Zeta Labs, who stated that they use a combination of live-generated imagery and real-time camera effects, then segmented the songs into musical beats, experimenting with the various structures and matching them with a complementary visual arc. The dreamlike imagery itself throughout the performance flourishes with every change in song, producing a multisensory experience for the crowd. Aligned with their music, the abstract projections typically elevated in tension before unveiling a burst of pattern and colour. Having this synchronization between sound and vision creates a fluidity between the audience, music, and visuals. Forming this synesthetic relationship between Tame Impala and the crowd through VJing sparks a sense of connection, producing a truly sensorial experience. Notable similarities can be seen between these modern-day performances and the liquid light shows of the 60s, responding to psychedelic rock through abstract projections and enticing the crowd through a sensorial experience. Synesthesia is vital for the experience of live music, and the ability to reflect it through their visual art as a VJ is very effective for a performance. Overall, I believe that VJ's visual art has had a stark influence on the music and club industry. Through the innovation of technology and software, these visual artists have gained a name for themselves in the 21st century and are vital for the experience of live music. Whilst forms of VJing have been seen for decades through analog techniques such as the liquid light shows, the digitalization of society has allowed the art form to be recognized globally and has formed an international narrative between artists to collaborate and share conversations. This development of software allowed for a breakthrough in popularity and formed the name to the current day VJ. This essay has explored how this art form creates a relationship between the music, visual art, and the artist through a fusion of found footage and real-time effects. This connection is also formed through the production of synesthesia. The relationship between sound and vision has had a stark influence on the practice of the VJ. Weirdcore has certainly had a large impact on the VJ scene, breaking boundaries of consciousness through his immersive visual art, including the audience in Aphex Twin's performances allowed the artist to break the barrier between the art and the crowd, creating a momentary experience that can't be revisited. I explored this motif of transient art throughout this essay, as this practice is viewed temporarily. It will always be a complex art form to preserve. This lack of preservation heightens the under-acknowledgement for the art of the VJ to ever be considered a form of high art, as it will always be a museum context. Some VJs themselves, such as Weirdcore, don't consider themselves as artists, so maybe it doesn't need to be viewed in a fine art setting and is purely for heightening the experience of the crowd. The reason why I've chosen to analyse why the video jockey is integral to the live music scene through these three lenses is because they all played a large role in allowing the VJ to regain popularity and make a name for itself today.